On today's video, we are going to be testing out the brand new DJI Mini 2 firmware. This is version 01.06.0200, and if we look at the release notes, we have got optimized user experience and improved overall software stability. Sadly, this does not give us a huge amount of information, so we're going to take a good look ourselves and do a little test flight just to make sure that this is absolutely safe to install. Now, whenever we do a firmware update, it tends to reset a whole bunch of settings. So as you can see, if we pop into the safety tab, our return to home altitude has changed from what I had it, so you will need to reset that to exactly what you want, as well as the maximum distance sets to default 2000, so we're going to need to change that as well. Of course, please do make sure that after every firmware update you do go into all the menus and just make sure everything is exactly how you want it to be. A small little feature when we do look at the DJI Mini 2 is because it does have that front LED down at the front, whenever we update the firmware it seems to reset to the default colour, so of course I do need to quickly change it back to yellow, which of course are my channel's colours. On this update video, I wanted to test a brand new concept for the channel and just see what you guys think to this. Rather than it just being flicking through a few settings and doing the old usual, I thought I'm going to give you something a little bit different for this one, whilst of course I am testing all of the features out on the DJI Mini 2 to make sure it is safe to install. So today's test flight is filmed in Poole. Poole is a village in the East Riding of Yorkshire, lying on the north bank of the Humber estuary. The village is situated approximately 6 miles or 10 kilometres east of the city of Kingston upon Hull, which of course is my hometown. Now, back into Poole's history, there was a very successful shipyard at Poole which took advantage of the sloping beach at that particular position because it's a really good place for launching ships. This yard built some ships for the Royal Navy between 1739 and 1774, and in total 3 warships were built at this site. If we do look at some of the footage I've taken previously, you can see that some of the old barges are still in position and sunk into the banks, but it just really makes something really interesting to photograph, and obviously just a reminder of this place's deep history. Historically, Poole was known for shrimp fisheries. In around 1900, the lower part of Head and Haven, or Poole Creek if you wish, in the Humber, and Poole Road were access for a numerous fleet of small and medium-sized boats, also known as Poole shrimpers. Of course, this has now dried up, but it's always interesting to see what these villages were actually used for in the past. So on screen we have St Andrew's Church. Now, the present church was built in 1355, replacing a church on the banks of the Humber which was in a ruinous state and subject to deep floods. Initially dedicated to St Mary, then from the 15th century it was also dedicated to St Andrew, which of course carries its current name. The church was burnt during the English Civil War. At the same time, the fort at Poole was attacked on the 11th of November 1642. It was repaired in 1663 and again in 1700 to its current state. So as we explore Poole further on with our drone, we can see this area here, which is known as Fort Poole. Now, batteries have been built in Poole by Henry VIII and Charles I during the Civil War, during the Siege of Hull and the Napoleonic Wars. The first fort built here on the site was started in 1542 with a capacity for 12 guns, and the current fort was built in 1861 to 1864. At the outset of the First World War, Poole was judged too close to Hull, so was disarmed when new forts were built at Sunk Island and Stallingborough. The fort was then simply used as a training base between the two wars. In 1960, Fort Poole was released from the Ministry of Defence and further shut down. In 1964, however, a group of volunteers, the Friends of Fort Poole, took over the site and began to restore the fort as a heritage museum. Fort Poole finally opened to the public in the year 2000, where it housed the last remaining Blackburn Beverley heavy transport aircraft produced by the British aircraft manufacturer Blackburn Aircraft. As you can see, the aircraft is missing a few vital parts, and this is purely because, sadly, due to the closure of Fort Poole in 2020 after COVID, the Blackburn Beverley has been purchased at auction for a sum of £21,000 and is currently in the process of being dismantled and moved to a new home. So that's a little history lesson on the village of Paul on the banks of Humber. As you can see, during this flight we have tested all of the features on the DJI Mini 2. We of course have tested the return to home features, we've taken some photos, we've tested the signal, the compass and everything that we need to check, and everything seems to be working exactly as it should. Of course, because we are out in the open, I'm not going to expect to get any really poor signal, and one thing I do have to mention is just how this DJI Mini 2 of course handles the wind absolutely perfectly. Such an absolute trooper and an absolutely amazing little drone. So please do let me know your thoughts as to what you found on this update. As far as I'm concerned, it does seem perfectly fine to install, and I'm really keen to hear what you thought of this new style of update video, giving a little history lesson and talking about a subject rather than just flying around aimlessly. Thank you very much for watching. If you did find this useful, please do give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you're awesome, and until next time, see you again soon.